بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وخاتم النبيين محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Respected listeners, yesterday we finished speaking about Surah Al-Jathiyah, completing the 25th juz. Today we move on to the 26th juz, which begins with Surah Al-Ahqaaf. Al-Ahqaaf meaning the sand dunes. Surah Al-Ahqaaf is a Meccan surah. It has 35 verses. The beginning of the surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the revelation of the book. Allah says, Hameen, this is the revelation of the book from Allah the Mighty, the Wise. Then Allah says, we did not create the heavens and the earth, but with true purpose and for a specified term. And those who disbelieve are averse to what they are warned of. Tell me about those whom you invoke besides Allah. Show me what they have created of the earth. Or do they have a share in the heavens, meaning in the creation of the heavens? Bring me a book before this one, or a trace of knowledge if you are truthful. Meaning again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses the Meccans through the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and with all of these different things that they ask for and all of these partners that they ascribe to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah's challenging them that, okay, if you are going to ascribe these partners, but what do they do then? So what benefit do they have? What have they created? How can they compare with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So if they can't compare with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then why do you take them as gods besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And then Allah speaks about how when even the verses of the Quran are revealed and are recited unto them, those who disbelieve, they say that this is open sorcery, or they will say that he made this up. So there was always this constant objection and rejection. So commonly. And again, this wasn't just with the Prophet ﷺ, but they've been saying this to the Anbiya for years, forever. So things like, he made it up, or this is sorcery, or why is it that a man came from amongst us? Why didn't God send an angel? Or he has gone mad. Why is it that the poor listened to him? Why is it that if this message was true, then it would have reached us first? So these are the common themes across all of these nations, and these are the common things that they would object using when it came to the messages of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For example, here, لَوْ كَانَ خَيْرًا مَا سَبَقُونَا إِلَيْهِ, that had it been a good thing, then these people, meaning the poor and weak, would not have preceded us towards it. And according to some narrations, we learn that this verse was revealed in relation to Zunaira radiyallahu anha, who was a slave girl of Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu anhu. And before he had accepted Islam, he used to beat her so that she would give up her Islam. And then, so at that point, some of the kuffar, some of the disbelievers began saying that had this Islamic faith been a good thing, then this worthless Zunaira wouldn't have preceded us in embracing it. Then Allah speaks about the believers and what their rewards will be. Allah says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهُ ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. And in another verse similar to this, Allah says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهُ ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا تَتَنَزَّلُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ. Indeed, those who believe, those who say that Allah is our Lord, then they remain firm. There shall be no fear over them, nor shall they grieve. This is the translation of this one. And the other one, it says that the angels descend upon them. Anyway, continuing here, Allah says, أُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ الْجَنَّةِ خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا. These are the people of Jannah. Therein they shall remain forever, as a reward or in exchange for that which they used to do. And then Allah speaks about the rights of parents, but more specifically of the rights of a mother, because of the difficulties and challenges she faces during pregnancy and so on. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, after mentioning some of the rights of parents, He speaks about a particular dua which is similar to the dua of Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salatu wasalam. But here, the dua is actually attributed, and the ulama, many of them agree, that this verse was in relation to Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu. And what happened was, well, the dua is that, my Lord, أوزعني أن أشكر نعمتك التي أنعمت علي وعلى والدي وأن أعمل صالحا ترضاه وأصلح لي في ذريتي إني تبت إليك وإني من المسلمين. That, my Lord, grant me the ability to remain grateful for your favor which you have bestowed upon me and upon my parents, and that I do good through which you become pleased with me, and grant me goodness in my children or in my progeny. Indeed, I repent to you, and I truly am of those who submit to you. What happened was, well, if we look at the life of Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu, that when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as a young man, when he travelled to Syria for training, and that time his Khadija radiyallahu anha, she would finance his trips. So Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu was with him. Now the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was 20 at the time. So this was before his marriage to Khadija radiyallahu anha. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu was 2 years different. So he was 18, 2 years younger than him. But he witnessed the qualities of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in that journey, and he became very attached to him and really admired him. So he would accompany him everywhere. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam reached the age of 40 and was blessed with prophethood, Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu, at the age of 38, he was the first adult male to embrace Islam, and he always stuck with the Prophet ﷺ and supported him. And his dua, so this is what is meant by Allah's favour upon him, that he was so close to the Prophet ﷺ, and he also freed many slaves. Sayyidina Bilal radiyallahu anhu was freed by him and so on. And his progeny and his family, well, that prayer, Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu was quite unique in that regard, that from all the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum, only Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu had the distinction where him, his parents and his offspring all embraced Islam and had the honor of being the noble companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, even though his father Abu Quhafa radiyallahu anhu, he embraced Islam after the conquest of Mecca. And, this is if this is a Meccan surah, then it's possible that this could have been glad tidings, that he would accept, or according to some ulama, they have actually said that this verse was a Madani verse. Anyway, so the status of Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu is alluded to here. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the story of the people of Ad and how the Prophet Hud alayhi salatu wasalam, he warned them, yet they refused, and how they were punished. And again, these are examples to the Meccans. Look at the people of Ad, they were very powerful, they were mighty, but their might, their power, their strength was nothing when it came to the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We then move on to Surah Muhammad. Surah Muhammad is a Madani surah. It has 38 verses, and Allah begins the surah by saying, الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا وَصَدُّوا عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَضَلَّ أَعْمَالَهُمْ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَآمَنُوا بِمَا نُزِّلَ عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ وَهُوَ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّهِمْ كَفَّرَ عَنْهُمْ سَيِّئَاتِهِمْ وَأَصْلَحَ بَالَهُمْ. Those who have disbelieved and have prevented others from Allah's way, Allah has rendered their deeds vain. And those who believed and who did good, and who believed in that which is revealed to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that is the truth from their Lord. He will shed off their sins and will rectify their state. Surah Muhammad is actually also given another name as Surah Al-Qital, means Surah of War, because in this surah Allah lays down the rules of fighting in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this surah was revealed shortly after the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba radiallahu anhum had migrated to Medina. Remember I mentioned the other day as well that the Prophet ﷺ, when he was leaving Mecca, he turned round and he said that you are the dearest of all cities to me in the world. Had it not been for the Meccans driving me out, then I would never have given up on this. And when he got to Medina, then shortly thereafter, these verses this surah was revealed. In this surah, there are many laws related to fighting in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, including, for example, Allah says, فَإِذَا لَقِيتُمُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا فَضَرْبَ الرِّقَابِ حَتَّى إِذَا أَثْخَنْتُمُوهُمْ فَشُدُّوا الْوَثَاقِ فَإِمَّا مَنًّا بَعْدُ وَإِمَّا فِدَاءً حَتَّى تَضَعَ الْحَرْبُ أَوْزَارَهَا. So when you encounter those who have disbelieved, then smite their necks until when you have broken their strength thoroughly. Then tie fast the bond. Then either set them free as a favour or after receiving ransom until the war throws down its load of arms. Now remember, this was a time until then the Sahaba radiallahu anhum and the Mushrikeen had been persecuted by the Mushrikeen in Mecca for many years. Some of them had even met death as a result of their persecution, and some of them just narrowly escaped due to the generosity of some of the believers. So for example, Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu anhu, the amount of torment and torture that he went through, he would have been killed were it not for the generosity of Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, who purchased him at a very high price. So now that the believers had moved to Medina, this was now Allah was preparing Islam at the next stage, where the Prophet ﷺ would now be instructed or be permitted, along with the believers, to defend and to take arms up against the disbelievers who had been persecuting them for so many years. Now here, for example, and I mentioned that in this surah, many laws related to battle are mentioned. So here, for example, some laws related to the prisoners of war. So Allah says that when you have tied fast the bond, meaning by making them captives, then either set them free or set them free after as a favour or after receiving ransom. Now, if you remember, we spoke about the Battle of Badr, and at the Battle of Badr, I mentioned there that when it came to the captives of Badr, the Prophet ﷺ, he chose to, along with most of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, to release them on ransom. And I mentioned at the time as well that the reason the Sahaba radiallahu anhum had chosen this, and the Prophet ﷺ, was that they felt that this might help bring back some of these who would go back and talk about the generosity and so on of the Prophet ﷺ. And also some of the believers were hopeful of the money and the ransom money itself. And at that time, the Prophet ﷺ had told them, however, that Allah had said that if they were to release the prisoners, then in the next battle, the Muslims would lose that many people in fighting. And we learned that this happened during the Battle of Uhud, that when in the Battle of Badr, the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, the Prophet ﷺ, they allowed 70 of the disbelievers to return to Mecca in exchange for ransom. During the Battle of Uhud, 70 of the Muslims fell down as shaheed. Now, at that point, during that time, the Prophet ﷺ says that, when a grave punishment of Allah was very close due to this actions, the actions of ours. And this would have befallen everybody except for Umar ibn al-Khattab and Sayyidina Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh radiyallahu anhuma, as they would have been spared because they were the only two companions that had disagreed with the idea of accepting this ransom, and they had given the opinion that they should be killed so as to cut off the roots of this evil. However, here it's very clear, it mentions that there is an option for ransom. So what's the ruling? The ruling is that yes, even though initially this option wasn't there or shouldn't have been there, but later on things have changed. And the reason being is that at the Battle of Badr, remember, there was Sahaba radiallahu anhum were less, and by returning these, the enemy here, this would have further strengthened or allowed to continue to strengthen the might of the Quraysh. So for that reason, Allah didn't want or disliked these to be ransomed. But now we see, by now we're talking about, this refers to the Battle of Hudaybiyah, or following the time of Hudaybiyah, even though it was revealed earlier on. But then, see, what happened is later on, the Muslims, they became stronger, so they could do things like this. So this is the difference between the two verses. In fact, Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu himself says that on the occasion of the Battle of Badr, the number of Muslims was small. Therefore, releasing the prisoners against ransom or releasing them as a gesture of grace was both prohibited. But finally, when the Muslims and Islam went on to prosper, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala abrogated the earlier injunction, and then this verse was revealed. And the ulama agree that because this was the later action of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in relation to prisoners of war. In the surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also speaks about the reward of those who do good and who have believed, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lists some of the characteristics of Jannah, especially the water in Jannah. For example, Allah says that فيها أنهار من ماء غير آسن وأنهار من لبن لم يتغير طعمه وأنهار من خمر لذة للشاربين وأنهار من عسل مصفى. In it there are rivers of water which never spoil, and rivers of milk, the taste of which does not go bad, and rivers of wine, delicious to the drinkers, and rivers of honey, fully purified. But then, in contrast, you have those who will be in the fire and will be given boiling water to drink, and it will tear their bowels into pieces. As I mentioned, Surah Muhammad has many laws related to battle, and obviously this isn't the time and the place to go through all of that. We then recited Surah Al-Fath, meaning the victory. And this is a Madani surah, has 29 verses. Allah begins the surah by saying, Inna fatahna lak fathan mubina. Surely we have granted you an open and clear victory. لِيَغْفِرَ لَكَ اللَّهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِكَ وَمَا تَأَخَّرَ, so that Allah may forgive you of your previous and subsequent faults, and may complete His favour upon you, and may guide you to a straight path, and so that Allah may support you with mighty support. Now, according to a consensus of the ulama, the leading authorities on tafsir, this surah was revealed when, after signing the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, the Prophet ﷺ was on his way back to Medina. This was in the 6th year of Hijrah, in the month of Dhul Qa'dah. And this surah, it prophesied the great victory, or according to some, this in itself was the great victory. what had happened was, the Prophet ﷺ once saw a dream whilst in Medina, that he had gone to Mecca with the Sahaba radiallahu anhum and entered it peacefully and performed the Umrah. And then in his dream he saw that they took off their ihram, and then some of them had their heads shaven and some of them had their hair cut short. Then the Prophet ﷺ, he entered the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the key of the house fell into his hand. The Prophet ﷺ related this dream to the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. And remember, in a hadith we learn, the Prophet ﷺ says that the dreams of a prophet is wahi. So the Sahaba radiallahu anhum took this as a revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they were extremely excited that this means that we will do Umrah. Now, the Prophet ﷺ didn't tell them when this would happen. So the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, in their eagerness, they began to prepare. And when the Prophet ﷺ saw their eagerness and the fact that they'd already begun to prepare, he also made an intention to march with them towards Mecca to perform Umrah. The Prophet ﷺ, he invited not just the companions but the surrounding tribes as well, which included some of the Bedouin. Now, they refused, some of the Bedouin, and they said that, look, Muhammad and his companions, they want to push us into the jaws of death. And they were convinced that the Muslims wouldn't return back from Mecca, because there were only a few of them, number one. And number two is that they were going towards Mecca, and the Meccans there would all come out in full force against the Prophet ﷺ. In any case, the Prophet ﷺ, he set off with the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. Salama radiallahu anha, his blessed wife, she accompanied him on this journey. Prophet ﷺ mounted his camel Qaswa, the name of his camel Qaswa, and the Sahaba radiallahu anhum were approximately 1,400. Now, they didn't have any weapons, they just had their swords with them. They began the journey in Dhul Qa'dah, and when they reached Dhul Hulayfa, they wore their ihram. When the Meccans had learnt that the believers were on their way towards Mecca, they were concerned that if Muhammad was to enter Mecca, then the whole of Arabia would mock them and say that we were subdued by the Muslims and we couldn't prevent them from entering into Mecca. So what they did is that they sent a dispatch headed by Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anhu, who hadn't accepted Islam until then, to intercept the Muslims. And also there were some others from some of the neighbouring tribes who also were part of this. Now they pitched their tents at a place called Balda, and they pledged to stop the Prophet ﷺ from entering into Mecca, and they wished to declare war against him. SubhanAllah, what they would do is they had people pitched on all the mountains, and they would shout information one to another all the way back to Mecca. This was their way of communicating. The Prophet ﷺ also sent somebody to Mecca to observe and see what the Quraysh were up to. So this person, Sayyidina Bishr ibn Sufyan radiallahu anhu, he went and he informed the Prophet ﷺ when he returned that the Meccans were preparing for an all-out war. This Prophet ﷺ expressed his regret and said, look, we've been at so many wars with them, and they've become completely weakened. But even then they don't give up. So then he said a few things and said that, if they want to, I shall not stop fighting with them. I'll carry on fighting until my neck is separated from the rest of my body. Anyway, the Prophet ﷺ, he gathered the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and he delivered a sermon in which he sought their opinion about fighting against the enemy. It was at that point Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu and some of the others said that, O Prophet of Allah, You've come out on a peaceful mission with the intention of visiting the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so not with the intention of fighting. So, keep to this peaceful intention. However, if anyone stops us from entering Makkah, then we shall fight. And according to some narrations we learn, there was at this point also that Sayyidina Miqdad ibn al-Aswad radiyallahu anhu, he said, O Prophets of Allah, we are not like Banu Israel, and will not say to you like they said, اذهب أنت وربك فقاتلا إنا هاهنا قاعدون, that you and your Lord go and fight, we are here sitting. No, Prophets of Allah, we are with you at all costs. So seeing the determination of the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam decided that they should move forward towards the direction of Makkah. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they approached Makkah, Khalid ibn Walid and his cavalry, they noticed and they moved forward, and they positioned themselves in a way to block the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from entering. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he put a unit in front of, meaning in opposition to stand against Khalid ibn Walid. Then it was Zuhr Salah time, so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam instructed Sayyidina Bilal radiyallahu anhu, gave the adhan. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam led them in prayer. Sayyidina Khalid ibn Walid radiyallahu anhu actually used to say afterwards, this was a golden opportunity to wipe them out because they were praying. But then we thought to ourselves, it doesn't matter, they'll pray again anyway. So the next time they pray, we'll attack them whilst they're in prayer. But then in the meantime, Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam came down with wahi, and he informed the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam about Salatul Khawf, meaning the prayer of fear. So when the Prophet when the Muslims are in battle, how they should pray. So there'd be a group who prays and a group who engages with the enemy, and then halfway through they'll change, they'll swap. It's all mentioned. Now, I alluded to this when we were doing, I believe it was Surah Al-Ma'idah. Now, when the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba radiyallahu anhu were near to Hudaybiyah, the forelegs of his she-camel, it slipped and sat down. The camel sat down. The Sahaba radiyallahu anhu said, what is it with Qaswa that she's doing this? Is she enraged? So then the Prophet ﷺ said that no, this isn't Qaswa and she doesn't do this. Rather, this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has stopped Qaswa just as he had stopped the men of the elephant, referring to the story of Abraham. Then it was at this point that the Prophet ﷺ said that whatever proposal and demands the Quraysh put forward today, as long as the symbols of Allah are sanctified, then I shall accept them. So then the Prophet ﷺ moved away from there, and then he stationed himself with the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum on the other side of Hudaybiyah. But there was less water where they were because the disbelievers had taken up all the positions where there was an abundance of water. Now, there was a well there in Hudaybiyah, but there was very little water. So the Prophet ﷺ, he rinsed his mouth in it, and then he pitched one of his arrows in there. As soon as he did this, water bubbled forth from the well, and there was an abundance of it. Now, then the Meccans, they began to send their messengers, and the negotiations began. First, Budayl ibn Warqa radiyallahu anhu later accepted Islam. He was sent. He visited the Prophet ﷺ and said, look, the whole of Mecca have come out to confront you. They have taken up all the water spots. They'll never allow you to enter Mecca. So then the Prophet ﷺ said that, look, we haven't come to fight. However, if they block us from performing Umrah, we will fight. And then he repeated what he had said before, that look, Quraysh have become weak. And even then they don't behave. We will continue to fight if we need to. So then Budayl said that I will convey the message. When he returned, he told them, some of them didn't want to even listen. Anyway, Urwat ibn Mas'ud he advised that, look, let's at least hear him. So when Budayl conveyed the message, Urwa said to the leaders of Quraysh that, look, Muhammad's suggestions are fair. They should be accepted. So then he said, look, give me permission, let me go and speak to the Prophet ﷺ. So he was the second person to come and visit the Prophet ﷺ. And he said, look, and he tried a different tactic. He said, look, oh Muhammad, if you wipe out your own people, the Quraysh, will it be good for you? Have you ever heard of anybody who has harmed his own people? So then there was a bit of a debate between the Sahaba radiallahu anhum and Urwa. And Urwa, he says himself, that he says, لَقَدْ رُفِضْتُ عَلَى الْمُلُوكِ. Indeed, I have been sent, or I have visited as an emissary many kings. وَفَضْتُ عَلَى قَيْسَرَ وَكِسْرَى. That I have gone as a delegation, as part of a delegation to Qaisar, the Caesars and the Khosrows. And then he says, وَاللَّهِ إِنْ رَأَيْتُ مَلِكًا قَطُّ يُعَظِّمُهُ أَصْحَابُهُ مَا يُعَظِّمُ أَصْحَابُ مُحَمَّدٍ مُحَمَّدًا. That by Allah, I have not seen a king ever whose companions revere and respect him like the way Muhammad's companions revere and respect him. He says, فَوَاللَّهِ مَا تَنَخَّمَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ نُخَامَةً إِلَّا وَقَعَتْ فِي كَفِّ رَجُلٍ مِّنْهُمْ فَدَلَكَ بِهَا وَجْهَهُ وَجِلْدَهُ وَإِذَا أَمَرَهُمْ ابْتَدَرُوا أَمْرَهُ وَإِذَا تَوَدَّأَ كَادُوا يَقْتَتِلُونَ عَلَى وُضُوئِهِ وَإِذَا تَكَلَّمَ خَفَضُوا أَصْوَاتَهُمْ عِنْدَهُ وَمَا يُحِدُّونَ إِلَيْهِ النَّظْرَ تَعْظِيمًا لَهُ صلى الله عليه وسلم. He says, by Allah, the Messenger of Allah doesn't even spit except that it falls into the hands of one of them, and then he wipes his face and his body with it. And when he instructs them, they rush to his command. And when he performs wudu, they fight over his wudu water. And when he speaks, they lower their voices near him, and they do not look or stare at him out of respect for him. This was the respect, subhanAllah, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum had for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It said that when they would sit in front of him, birds would perch themselves on their heads, because that's how silently and how respectfully they would sit in front of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In any way, he said, look, he has given you a fair deal, accept it. But they said, no, they won't accept it. They said, Muhammad, he has to go back this year, and he may come back the following year. So when Urwa's suggestion wasn't accepted, he just returned with his own people. Then they had somebody else by the name of Jalis ibn Alqamah. He was a leader of the Bedouins. He visited the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he saw the Sahaba in ihram and with their sacrificial animals. So he also returned and said, look, these people have come to perform Umrah. We shouldn't stop them. We've never done this before. They didn't listen to him. Another person came. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam repeated the same that he said always to Budayl and Budayl ibn Warqa and Urwa ibn Mas'ud. So they went back and they communicated the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's reply to them. Now, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in Hudaybiyah, the Quraysh began to get worried that would the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam launch an attack. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, look, he sent Sayyidina, he first asked that, look, the message I want to send is that we haven't come to fight, we've come to perform Umrah. So don't block our way. So he asked Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu first that you go and speak to them. But Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu said, look, the Quraysh, I'm one of their greatest enemies. And unfortunately, there's not a single member of my family or my tribe in Makkah that will support me. So I won't be able to change anyone's mind. So I suggest Uthman goes. So Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu, because of his tribe, and he held special power and honor in the whole of Makkah. So that's why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam accepted this, and he sent Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu for this task. But then he also informed Uthman radiallahu anhu that go and visit the Sahaba radiallahu anhu and those who had remained behind, the poor Muslims, and give them the glad tidings that soon we will march onto Makkah and we will take over. Now, initially, Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu, he faced some opposition, but then Aban ibn Sa'id, who later on accepted Islam, he met him and he gave him protection. And what would happen is, the traditions were such that if somebody was to give Uthman radiallahu anhu protection, then no one in Makkah, despite all of these hostilities and the anger and frustrations, no one could harm him because now he'd been given protection by somebody. Anyway, Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu, he met each of the leaders of Quraysh, conveyed the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's message that we haven't come to fight, and we've only come for Umrah. After we finish Umrah, we'll return home. But if the road is blocked, then we will fight. Now, they rejected the proposal. Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu, he visited some of the Muslims, the poor Muslims, as the Prophet ﷺ had instructed him. The Meccans, however, did offer Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu that, look, if you want to, since you're here, you can perform tawaf of the house of Allah if you want. But he refused, saying, no, not until the Prophet ﷺ first performs tawaf, Umrah, I won't do it. Now, Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu, he continued to stay for a few nights and invite the Quraysh to accept the message of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, in the meantime, the Quraysh, they selected 50 men with the task of looking out to see if they could catch the Prophet ﷺ and if they found an opportunity to assassinate him. Now, while these men were on the lookout, the Prophet ﷺ's bodyguard, Muhammad ibn Maslama, he captured them and brought them to the Prophet ﷺ. Now, on one hand, you've got Sayyidina Uthman in Makkah, and then you've got these who have been captured. Then you had a few more who shot some arrows towards the Muslims and threw stones at them. And one of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum was actually martyred. And the Muslims, they captured 10 of the horse riders. And then amongst all of this, there was a rumor that Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu had been assassinated. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam heard this, he gathered the Sahaba radiallahu anhum under an acacia tree, and they took a pledge from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that they would fight the Quraysh to the last breath. And this pledge became known as Bay'atul Ridwan. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, many hadith speak about the virtues of those who took the pledge under this tree and who participated in Bay'atul Ridwan. During this pledge, Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu was actually not there. He was in Mecca. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he placed his other hand on top of the hands and he said, this hand is like Uthman's hand and I'll take Uthman's pledge. Now, the Quraysh, having had the Muslims at Hudaybiyah and watching them, they were struck by awe and they wanted peace. So they sent 3 men to negotiate. Now, Suhail ibn Amr was one of them. And when the Prophet ﷺ saw him from afar, he said that, look, it seems like the Quraysh want to make peace. In any case, Suhail ibn Amr came and he informed the Prophet ﷺ, first of all, that this rumour that Uthman radiallahu anhu had been killed is wrong. He is still alive. If you hand back our men, then we will hand Uthman radiallahu anhu. So this exchange took place. Then Suhail saw that the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba radiallahu anhum were willing to lay down their lives. Sorry, the first time when he saw Suhail, he didn't say that they've come to make peace. First time Suhail came, they spoke, they negotiated. Then the Prophet ﷺ told them what he wanted. When he went back, the Quraysh suggested that, look, the only way that we will accept is that this year they won't enter Makkah, they'll go back. But they can visit the following year for 3 days to perform Umrah. And when Suhail came back with this message, Prophet ﷺ at that point said, it seems that the Quraysh want to make peace, they've sent him again. So Suhail, he sat in front of the Prophet ﷺ, and some of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum also spoke at that time. Words got a bit heated, and there's some verses that are revealed as a result of that do not raise your voice above the voice of the Prophet ﷺ. Some of the ulama say that was revealed in relation to that. Then they agreed on this peace treaty. Now, Prophet ﷺ instructed Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu to write it down. Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Suhail said, look, we don't know who Rahman ar-Rahim is, so stick to Bismillahumma. So basically, as he was writing it, Suhail would say, no, this we don't agree with. So for example, Sayyidina Ali wrote, Min Muhammadin Rasulillah. But then Suhail said, look, we don't accept you as a messenger of Allah. If we did, then we wouldn't have this issue here today. So we don't want to have anything in the treaty that goes against the beliefs of any one group. So the Prophet ﷺ instructed Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu to rub that out. But Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu says, no, Prophet of Allah, I can't rub that out. So, and in fact there were other Sahaba who stopped him from rubbing it out. So then the Prophet himself took the letter and wrote it himself. هذا ما قاضى محمد بن عبد الله وسهيل بن عمرو وأصلح على وضع الحرب عن الناس 10 سنين يأمن فيه الناس ويكف بعضهم عن بعض. And this is what Muhammad ibn Abdullah and Suhail ibn Amr drew a treaty over, and they agree upon the cessation of battle and fighting, or that the war shall be suspended for 10 years, during which people will be able to live peacefully and no party would indulge in any hostility against the other. Now, the Prophet ﷺ still wanted to have the Sahaba radiallahu do tawaf, but then Suhail said, look, that isn't going to happen. And then Suhail also added in a few other clauses, such as if someone from the Meccans were to go to Medina, then the Muslims should return them. However, if someone from Medina goes to Mecca, then they wouldn't be returned. So the Prophet ﷺ, he accepted that clause. And there were a few clauses in there, and later on, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum were really upset. First of all, they were prevented from performing Umrah. And then secondly, they had to accept all of these clauses and all these conditions. And Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu actually went to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said, "O Prophet of Allah, aren't we on the truth? Aren't you the true messenger of Allah? Aren't our martyrs in Jannah and their slain ones in the fire? Then why are we accepting these conditions?" So then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he comforted Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu and he said, "Look, Allah did promise me this, but Allah didn't say when. So this will happen." And so then Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he went to Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu and said the same. And then Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu himself says that, I never had any doubt until this time. But then one of the Sahaba radiallahu anhu told him, no, seek forgiveness and seek protection from the shaitan. So Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu did, and then he performed many nafil salat and he even freed some slaves. In any case, whilst these negotiations were going on and these signatures were being written in, Abu Jandal, who was the son of Suhail ibn Amr, he had accepted Islam, and his father had imprisoned him and tortured him at home. So he managed to escape. So Suhail, he said, look, this is the first attempt at breaking this condition. So if you don't return Abu Jandal, my son, then none of this treaty is going to work out. So the Prophet ﷺ comforted Abu Jandal, and he told him that, don't worry, Allah will pay for path for you. So he was returned. SubhanAllah, with Abu Jandal, he had to be returned at this point. And there were a few of them who had to be returned to the Meccans. What happened is when those few Muslims who were being tortured or who were being persecuted in Mecca, when they see the Muslims at Hudaybiyah, many of them escaped and reached there. So as part of this agreement, they would have to be returned. Now, Suhail ibn Amr, obviously, he was very upset that he saw his own son Abu Jandal there. So he said, I won't agree to this peace treaty unless he's returned. So the Prophet ﷺ said, look, just go and Allah will work something out. What happened is this group of these few, they escaped again, but they didn't go back to Medina this time, because they thought that if we go to Medina, we're going to be returned anywhere as per the deal. So they decided to camp somewhere in between Mecca and Medina. So it was near a place called Ghufar. They stopped there near Jeddah, and whenever anybody, so the news spread, so whenever anybody wanted to escape Mecca, they would go and join them. So there's about 70 of them, and included Sayyidina Abu Basir radiallahu anhu and Abu Jandal radiallahu anhu. So what they did is they formed a raiding party. So they completely brought a stop to the Meccan trade from Syria. So any of the caravans that were coming from Syria, they were unable to get past Abu Jandal radiallahu anhu and his party. So this completely brought down the Meccan economy. So then the Quraysh wrote to the Prophet ﷺ and said, look, you know what? Just take them back to Medina. We don't want them here anyway. We don't want them. We're not going to recall them. You just take them back to Medina. The Prophet ﷺ himself then, we see now the treaty was that they wouldn't perform Umrah that year. They would return and then they would come back the following year and complete their Umrah and stay for 3 days. So the Prophet ﷺ, he addressed the companions and told them that, look, slaughter your sacrificial animals and shave your heads and then take off the clothing of Ihram. But the Sahaba radiallahu anhum were extremely upset and none of them moved. So this upset the Prophet ﷺ. So he went and told Salama radiallahu anha. So she said, look, O Rasulullah, what you do, they're upset as well. So do something. You go outside, call the barber, tell him to shave your head in front of all of them. So the Prophet ﷺ did, and then all the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they followed suit. After this, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they returned towards Medina. When they reached Usfan, they had little food. Prophet ﷺ put out, it's a famous story, he put out a dining sheet and asked everybody to put whatever little they had onto their 1,400. They all sat and ate to their fill. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed them and Prophet ﷺ with this miracle. Now, despite the terms of this treaty and returning home without Umrah, this surah calls this a manifest victory. So Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu could hardly contain himself. So, oh, Messenger of Allah, this is a victory. So the Prophet ﷺ said, by him in whose hand is my life, this is indeed a clear victory. And how? Because of this treaty, the Quraysh, first of all, they got to see the Sahaba radiallahu anhum for a few days. They were observing them. And within the Makkans, they also they developed these factions and they split away from one another. So, for example, Budayl ibn Warqa, because remember, he wanted peace, or he wanted a certain judgment from the beginning, and he wanted that that the Muslims are allowed to do their Umrah. Same with Urwat ibn Mas'ud, so they separated. And the Makkans were highly impressed with the spirits of the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, who were willing to lay down their lives for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then they'd seen that even though the Muslims were ill-equipped, yet the Makkans were no match for them. And in fact, they could have actually attacked the Muslims, because remember, Makkah, they were in Makkah, so they had all the provisions and weaponry at hand. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put terror into their hearts, and they were unable to do this. Now, another thing the treaty did was that it cleared the path in this way that now the Sahaba radiallahu anhum and the Muslims could move around freely. So as a result, letters were sent to rulers around the world, inviting them towards Islam. And at Hudaybiyah, only 1,400 Muslims left. But now, after this, Muslim people started to accept Islam in their throngs, and they, one after the other, in groups, they all started to come and accept Islam. And as a result of this treaty, which the Meccans were bound to break anyway, the conquest of Mecca took place. So yes, this was a clear victory for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam actually said this to Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu during the conquest of Mecca, that, Umar, this is that incident that I have been narrating to you. And he even repeated this during the farewell Hajj, that undoubtedly there is no, in fact, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu himself said, undoubtedly there is no better and greater victory than the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. With this, we completed the topics mentioned in Surah Al-Fath. There is the other point about the the conquest of Khaybar, because this is also mentioned in this surah. And if you remember, I mentioned at the beginning that those Bedouins who had refused to take part in the march for Umrah, but then when it came to Khaybar, the conquest of Khaybar, they were really eager. Why? Because they knew that there was a lot of money involved. So there were a lot of spoils of war. So Allah mentions this here. With that, we come to the end of Surah Al-Fath. Next is Surah Al-Hujurat, but Surah Al-Hujurat itself has a lot. So, inshallah, I'll speak about that tomorrow. May Allah give us all the ability to understand. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.